My wife worked from home and often ordered food. I found out about a courier who often delivered groceries to us. At one point they were fucking in the car. I thought I had a good marriage. That's the kicker, isn't it? Thinking everything's fine while your world's unraveling right under your nose. My wife, Lauren, and I had been together for 6 years, married for 4. No kids, just us in our little suburban home with its neatly trimmed hedges and driveway that fit her new white sedan and my trusty old truck. Lauren worked as a freelance graphic designer, mostly from home, while I clocked in 9-to-5s at a local hardware store. She had her routines, and I had mine. I never thought much about the food delivery service she seemed to use all the time. Practically every other day, she'd be ordering something. "It's convenient," she'd say with a shrug, her eyes glued to her laptop. I figured she was just busy or maybe bored of cooking. I didn't question it. Looking back, maybe I should have. I'd occasionally see the delivery guy, a tall, fit dude with dark hair and that kind of laid-back charm you'd expect from someone who probably surfs in his free time. His name was Kyle. I knew because Lauren mentioned him in passing once or twice. "Kyle's nice. Always on time," she'd said with a little smile. It didn't bother me, why would it? He was just the guy bringing food, not some threat to our marriage. But Kyle wasn't just delivering food. It started small, things you'd only notice if you were paying attention. Lauren seemed happier, almost giddy, on the days Kyle dropped by. I remember walking into the kitchen one evening to find her laughing at something on her phone, cheeks flushed like a teenager with a crush. "What's so funny?" I asked, and she waved me off with a casual, "Just a meme." There were other signs, too. She started dressing up more, even though she wasn't leaving the house. When I joked about her looking nice for the cat, she just smirked and said, "Maybe I just want to feel good about myself." The tipping point was her sudden obsession with Thai food. Lauren never liked Thai before, she used to say the spices upset her stomach. But now, it was all she wanted. "Kyle knows the best places," she'd say, as if that explained everything. At the time, I chalked it up to one of those quirks people develop. You live with someone long enough, and you stop questioning the little changes. But it wasn't little, was it? I didn't know it then, but Kyle wasn't just delivering pad thai and spring rolls. He was delivering something else entirely, something that would shatter the life I thought we were building together. I should have seen it sooner. The signs were there, clear as day in hindsight, but I was too trusting, or maybe just too blind. Lauren's mood swings were sharper, and she started picking fights over the smallest things. My shoes by the door. Suddenly a crime. A pile of unopened mail on the counter. Grounds for a shouting match. When I tried to diffuse the arguments, she'd scoff and mutter, "Maybe if you paid more attention, we wouldn't have so many issues." That one stung because I did pay attention, just not to the right things, apparently. Then came the late nights. At first, she had excuses, a freelance deadline, or helping a friend with a project. Lauren barely had close friends, let alone ones who needed her assistance at 10 o'clock at night. I'd ask her about it, and she'd get defensive. "Why do you care so much? I'm allowed to have a life outside of you, you know." I wanted to believe her. I really did. The breaking point came on a Thursday. I'd worked a long shift at the store and was looking forward to a quiet evening with takeout and Netflix. Lauren had been acting off all day, on edge, checking her phone constantly, biting her nails like she used to back in college when she was stressed about exams. Around 8 p.m., she grabbed her purse and announced, "I'm running out to grab some things." It didn't make sense. We had groceries. I'd picked them up 2 days ago. "What do you need?" I asked, and her answer was so vague it practically screamed lie. "Just stuff for the house." "Don't wait up," she said, avoiding my eyes. The moment the door closed behind her, something in my gut twisted. I wasn't the suspicious type, but Lauren had been acting so weird lately that I couldn't just sit there. I grabbed my truck keys and decided to follow her. I felt ridiculous at first, like some paranoid fool in a bad soap opera. But that feeling evaporated the second I saw her car parked at the far end of a dimly lit lot behind a strip mall. There were no stores open, just a couple of delivery cars idling near the back entrance of a Thai restaurant. And there she was. Lauren was leaning into the open driver's side door of one of the cars, her face close to Kyle's as they talked and laughed. My stomach sank, but I told myself maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe they were just chatting. Friends can laugh, right? Then she climbed into his car. I couldn't move at first. My mind was racing, heart pounding so loud I thought they'd hear it from across the lot. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing, but I also couldn't stop myself from creeping closer. I parked a few rows away and walked up slowly, keeping to the shadows. When I was close enough, I saw them. Not talking. Not laughing. Having sex in the cramped front seat of his delivery car like a couple of reckless teenagers. My stomach twisted into a knot so tight it hurt. My hands clenched into fists, shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. This was Lauren, the woman I'd vowed to love and cherish, doing this. I didn't confront them, not yet. I wasn't thinking clearly. Instead, I backed away, got into my truck, and drove home in silence. My mind was a storm of emotions, anger, humiliation, sadness, but one thought cut through it all. This wasn't just a mistake or a one-time thing. Lauren had chosen this. And now, I had a choice to make. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, the image of Lauren and Kyle in that car burned into my mind. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the audacity of it all. She wasn't just sneaking around, she was flaunting it in the open, acting like I'd never find out. By morning, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit quietly and let her walk all over me. I deserved answers. Lauren came home around 7 a.m., her hair disheveled, makeup smudged, and an air of smugness that made my blood boil. She didn't even try to sneak in quietly. She dropped her keys on the counter, grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, and gave me a casual, "Morning." I stayed seated at the kitchen table, my coffee cold and untouched. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice as steady as I could manage. She froze for half a second before shrugging. "I told you, I was out." "Out where, Lauren?" Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you grilling me like this?" "I went to get stuff for the house, and then I ended up hanging out with a friend." "What's the big deal?" "A friend?" I repeated, my tone sharp enough to cut glass. "Like Kyle, maybe?" The way her face dropped for a split second told me everything I needed to know. But Lauren recovered fast, crossing her arms and scoffing like I'd just accused her of stealing candy from a baby. "Kyle? Seriously? He's just the delivery guy. Don't be ridiculous." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. "Don't lie to me, Lauren. I saw you. Last night. In his car." The color drained from her face, but instead of looking ashamed, she went straight to defense mode. "You followed me? Are you serious right now? What kind of psycho stalks their own wife?" My hands clenched into fists, but I kept my voice calm. The kind of husband who knows when something's not right. The kind who trusted his wife until she started sneaking around and screwing the delivery guy in a parking lot. Lauren's face twisted into something ugly, half guilt, half rage. "You're insane. You don't know what you saw." "I know exactly what I saw," I snapped. "Don't you dare try to gaslight me, Lauren. I'm not stupid." Her voice rose into a shriek. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. Kyle's just a distraction, okay? You're the one who's boring and predictable, stuck in your little routines while I'm stuck here, rotting away in this house." Asterisk so it's my fault now, asterisk, I said, my voice finally cracking with anger. You cheated because you're bored? Because I work hard to provide for us. Lauren threw her water bottle onto the counter, the plastic crumpling with the force. Oh, spare me the martyr act. You're so busy playing the good husband that you don't even notice when I'm unhappy. And screwing Kyle makes you happy? I fired back. She hesitated, her jaw tightening. Then, with an icy glare, she hissed, maybe it does. At least he pays attention to me. That was the final straw. I turned and walked toward the bedroom, her voice following me down the hall as she screamed about how unfair I was being, how I was the one driving her to this. I didn't care anymore. I grabbed my suitcase, started throwing clothes into it, and ignored her completely. By the time I wheeled it into the living room, she was standing there, her arms crossed and eyes blazing. Oh, so you're leaving now? Real mature, Josh. Run away like you always do. I stopped in the doorway, turning to look at her one last time. I'm not running away, Lauren. I'm done. You can keep Kyle and your Thai food. I'll be talking to a lawyer. Her mouth fell open, and for once, she didn't have a comeback. I slammed the door behind me, the sound echoing in my ears as I walked to my truck. I didn't know what was next, but I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to let her drag me down with her. Driving away felt like stepping off a cliff, and the fall didn't stop even after I'd parked my truck outside a cheap motel on the edge of town. My mind was a mess, a whirlwind of anger, humiliation, and sadness. I wanted to punch something, scream, do anything to stop feeling like my whole life had just been yanked out from under me. Instead, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The motel room was small and smelled faintly of bleach, but it was quiet. I needed that. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall, replaying Lauren's words in my head. You're boring and predictable. At least he pays attention to me. Was I really that bad of a husband? I didn't think so. Sure, I wasn't perfect, but I worked hard, paid the bills, and tried to keep things stable for us. Apparently, that wasn't enough for her. The first call came about an hour later. It was Lauren, of course. I didn't pick up. I wasn't ready to hear more of her excuses or screaming. She left a voicemail, her tone alternating between indignant and tearful. Josh, we need to talk. You can't just walk out like this. This is our marriage, and you don't get to make all the decisions. Call me back. I deleted it without listening to the rest. The text started soon after. First, they were angry, you're overreacting. This is your fault too. Then they turned manipulative, I made a mistake, but we can fix this. You're really going to throw everything away over one stupid thing. And finally, she went full guilt trip, I thought you were better than this, Josh. You're breaking my heart. I didn't reply. The next morning, I called a lawyer. He was an older guy named Frank, the kind of no-nonsense type who didn't sugarcoat anything. I laid it all out for him, the cheating, the fights, the parking lot incident. Frank listened without interrupting, then sighed. Well, Josh, you've got grounds for a divorce. No kids, so that simplifies things. But I'll warn you, if she's as volatile as you say, this isn't going to be pretty. I told him I didn't care about pretty. I just wanted out. 2 days later, I went back to the house to grab more of my stuff. Lauren wasn't home, her car was gone, which suited me just fine. I moved quickly, loading clothes, personal items, and anything else I couldn't bear to leave behind into my truck. Then I saw it, a stack of papers on the kitchen counter. At first, I thought they were junk mail or bills. But when I picked them up, my stomach dropped. They were printouts of text messages, my text messages. She had screenshots of old conversations I'd had with coworkers, friends, even my mom. And at the bottom of the stack was a handwritten note, Hope you're ready to explain this in court. Good luck, asshole. I stood there, stunned. She was preparing to twist every innocent conversation into something incriminating. Lauren wasn't just going to fight me on the divorce, she was planning to ruin me. The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't going to be a clean break. Lauren wasn't just a cheater, she was a manipulator, and she was about to turn this into a war. I sat in my truck with the stack of papers in my lap, my chest tight with a mix of anger and disbelief. Lauren was playing dirty, and I hadn't even filed the divorce papers yet. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. She wasn't just trying to protect herself, she was gearing up to attack me, twist the narrative, and make me look like the bad guy. I knew I had to be smart about this. Emotional outbursts weren't going to help. Lauren had already shown she was willing to lie and manipulate, and if I wasn't careful, she could easily make this whole thing spiral further out of control. The first thing I did was call Frank, my lawyer. I told him about the printouts, the threatening note, and Lauren's sudden shift from guilt to outright hostility. He wasn't surprised. This isn't uncommon in cases like yours, he said, his tone calm but firm. When people feel cornered, they lash out. It's her way of trying to regain control. What do I do? I asked. Document everything, Frank said. Every text, every voicemail, every interaction you have with her from now on. Don't engage in arguments. If she tries to provoke you, walk away. The calmer you stay, the better it'll look for you if this goes to court. It was solid advice, but it didn't make the situation any less infuriating. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Josh. It was Lauren, her voice sickly sweet in a way that instantly set off alarms. What do you want, Lauren? I said, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. I just think we should talk, you know. Clear the air, she said. This whole thing has gotten so out of hand. I don't want us to hate each other. I almost laughed at the irony. You don't want us to hate each other, but you're already preparing to drag me through the mud in court. There was a long pause, and then her tone shifted, the sweetness gone. You're overreacting. I'm just protecting myself. You're the one who ran off and started acting like a victim. Because you cheated on me, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. This isn't on me, Lauren. You made this mess. She started to say something, but I cut her off. Look, I'm done talking. If you have something to say, tell it to my lawyer. And with that, I hung up. But Lauren wasn't done. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages on social media from mutual friends and even a few of my coworkers. Lauren had apparently decided to take her version of events public. She posted a long, dramatic rant on Facebook, painting herself as the victim of an emotionally neglectful husband who had abandoned her without warning. She conveniently left out the part where she'd been screwing Kyle in a delivery car. The comments were a mixed bag. Some people sympathized with her, offering support and asking how they could help. Others were skeptical, questioning why she hadn't mentioned the cheating. I didn't respond publicly. As much as I wanted to set the record straight, Frank's advice echoed in my head, stay calm. Document everything. Instead, I took screenshots of her post and every comment under it. If she wanted to turn this into a circus, fine. I'd be ready. That night, as I sat in my motel room scrolling through the screenshots, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You should be careful, Josh. You don't know what Lauren's capable of. My stomach dropped. There was no name attached, but something about the tone felt familiar. My gut told me this wasn't just a random message. Someone knew more about Lauren, and possibly Kyle, than they were letting on. I replied cautiously, who is this? The response came almost instantly, just a friend. Be smart and watch your back. I stared at the screen, a sense of unease creeping over me. This whole situation was spiraling into something bigger than I'd anticipated. And for the first time, I wondered if Lauren's betrayal was just the tip of the iceberg. I couldn't shake the feeling that the anonymous text was more than just a warning. It felt like a puzzle piece, something that hinted at a bigger, darker picture I hadn't fully grasped yet. Who would send a message like that? And what did they mean by, "You don't know what Lauren's capable of"? The next day, I called Frank again and told him about the text. He told me to save the message and keep my guard up but not to let it distract me from the task at hand. Easier said than done. Lauren, meanwhile, had shifted into full damage control mode. She was calling friends, spinning her story, and even had the audacity to text me saying, "We should go to couples therapy. This doesn't have to end like this." I didn't respond. Therapy wasn't going to fix this, and I wasn't interested in pretending otherwise. Later that afternoon, as I was leaving the motel to grab some food, I noticed a car parked at the far end of the lot. It was a beat-up sedan, nothing unusual, but something about it made me pause. The windows were tinted, and I couldn't see inside, but it felt off. I shrugged it off, figuring I was just being paranoid. But when I came back from dinner, the car was still there. That night, I barely slept. Every creak and groan of the motel building felt like a threat. When morning came, I decided I needed to get out of that place, at least for a while. I drove to a nearby park, one of my favorite spots from years ago. It was quiet, with winding trails and a small pond that reflected the autumn leaves like a painting. I needed the calm, the space to think. But as I sat on a bench, staring at the water, my phone buzzed again. "Lauren's not who you think she is. She'll do whatever it takes to win." It was the same number as before. This time, I decided to push back. "Who are you? What do you know?" No response. I sighed, leaning back on the bench and rubbing my temples. It felt like I was living in some twisted soap opera, with secrets and betrayals piling up faster than I could process. Just as I was about to leave, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but local. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Josh." It was a man's voice, deep and hesitant. "Who is this?" I asked. "My name's Tom. You don't know me, but I know Lauren." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, you know her?" He hesitated, then said, "I've been where you are, man. Married to her, blindsided by her lies. She ruined my life." My grip on the phone tightened. "You're saying you're her ex-husband?" "Yeah," he said. "And trust me, what you're dealing with now. It's just the beginning. She's manipulative, vindictive, and she doesn't care who she hurts as long as she comes out on top." I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I wish someone had warned me," Tom said. "She's not just going to let you go. She'll fight dirty, and if she thinks you're a threat, she won't stop until she's destroyed you." The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy blanket. "What am I supposed to do?" "Be smart," he said. "Document everything. Stay calm. And don't underestimate her." Before I could ask anything else, he hung up. I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand. Lauren had always been difficult, but this was something else entirely. Her ex-husband's warning, combined with the anonymous texts, painted a picture of someone far more dangerous and calculating than I'd ever imagined. I realized then that I wasn't just dealing with a divorce. I was in a battle for my reputation, my future, and possibly even my safety. The car from the motel flashed in my memory again. What if it wasn't just paranoia? I didn't know who to trust anymore, but one thing was clear, I couldn't afford to let my guard down. The weight of Tom's warning hung heavy on my mind as I drove back to the motel. Every car that lingered too long behind me felt like a threat, and every unfamiliar face seemed suspicious. By the time I parked and stepped into my room, I was completely on edge. But it wasn't just paranoia, it was a gut feeling, the kind you learn to trust after everything starts falling apart. I double-checked the lock on my door and drew the curtains tightly shut. The room felt stifling, the silence pressing against my ears like a scream waiting to happen. I reached for my phone, staring at Tom's number in my recent calls. Should I call him back? Ask for more details? Or would that just pull me deeper into whatever mess Lauren was hiding? Instead, I opened my laptop. It was time to dig into her past. A quick search of public records confirmed Tom's story. Lauren had been married before, to a man named Thomas Whitaker, just 3 years before we met. The divorce had been finalized less than 6 months before we started dating. That fact alone sent a chill down my spine. She'd always claimed she'd been single for years before we met. I dug deeper, looking for anything that might explain why their marriage ended. There wasn't much, a few legal filings, a property dispute over a condo, and something that stood out, a restraining order. Tom had filed it against Lauren. I stared at the screen, the words blurring as my mind raced. Restraining orders weren't issued lightly. What had she done to him? And why hadn't I seen any of this before? Just as I was about to close the laptop, an email notification popped up. The subject line read, *, you need to know the truth. *, it was from an anonymous address. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the trackpad. My instinct screamed not to open it, but curiosity got the better of me. The email contained a single sentence and an attachment, *, this is what she's capable of. I clicked on the attachment. It was a photo, grainy, clearly taken with an old phone. It showed a car parked in a driveway, its windows smashed in and the hood spray-painted with the word liar in big, angry letters. The caption below read, Tom's car. 2 weeks after he filed for divorce. My stomach churned. Was this real? Or just someone trying to mess with me? I needed answers, but I couldn't call Lauren. She'd lie, manipulate, twist the story like she always did. And I wasn't ready to confront her until I had concrete proof of what I was dealing with. The next morning, I decided to go back to my house. Not to confront Lauren, but to see if I could find anything that might shed light on what she was up to. I parked down the street and walked quietly to the side door, using the spare key I hadn't yet returned. The house was eerily quiet, and for a moment, I thought she wasn't home. But then I heard voices coming from the living room. I crept closer, careful to stay out of sight. It was Lauren and Kyle. You don't get it, Lauren was saying, her tone sharp and irritated. Josh isn't stupid. He's already making moves, and if we're not careful, he'll ruin everything. Kyle's voice was calmer, almost smug. Relax. He's a pushover. Always has been. He won't fight back. You don't know him like I do, she snapped. He's not as weak as he seems. If he figures out what we're doing, her voice trailed off, and I strained to hear the rest. Kyle laughed, a low, mocking sound. Then we make sure he doesn't have the chance. My blood ran cold. What the hell did that mean? I backed away quietly, my heart pounding in my chest. Whatever Lauren and Kyle were planning, it wasn't just about winning the divorce. They were playing a long game, and I had a sinking feeling I was the one they were setting up to lose. I slipped out of the house unnoticed, my mind racing with questions. What exactly were they plotting? And how far were they willing to go to get what they wanted? One thing was certain, I couldn't face this alone anymore. It was time to build my own defense. Time to turn the tables. Driving away from the house, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. Lauren and Kyle weren't just messing around, they were actively scheming against me. That much was clear. The problem was, I didn't know what their endgame was, or how far they were willing to go to achieve it. Back at the motel, I decided to follow Frank's advice and document everything. I started with the notes Lauren had left, the text messages from the unknown number, and now the ominous conversation I'd overheard between her and Kyle. I wrote it all down while the details were fresh in my mind. But I needed more than a collection of notes and screenshots. If Lauren and Kyle were going to play dirty, I needed proof of their lies and manipulations. Something concrete that would make their schemes fall apart. That's when I remembered the security cameras. A couple of years ago, I'd installed a basic security system around the house, just a couple of cameras covering the front porch, the driveway, and the backyard. Lauren never liked them, said they made her feel watched, so I'd rarely used them. But if they were still active, they might have picked up something useful. I logged into the camera system from my laptop. To my relief, the cameras were still operational, and the footage was backed up to the cloud. I scrolled through the clips, starting from the day I'd moved out. It didn't take long to find something interesting. 2 nights after I left, a delivery van pulled into the driveway. It was Kyle. He wasn't delivering anything this time, though. He got out of the van, looked around nervously, and walked to the front door. Lauren let him in, her smile wide, almost predatory. They didn't waste time. Less than 10 minutes later, they were back outside, laughing as they leaned against the van, their bodies close. I clicked forward to the next clip. The following day, a man in a suit showed up. I didn't recognize him, but the way Lauren greeted him, flirty, overly familiar, sent a sour taste to my mouth. He handed her a stack of papers, and they talked for a while on the porch. She was all smiles, nodding eagerly, while he gestured toward the driveway, the house, and eventually Kyle's van, which was parked out front again. It clicked. She wasn't just playing defense in the divorce, she was lining up some kind of legal strategy. And judging by the way she and Kyle were acting, they had no problem pulling people into their schemes. That night, I called Tom again. "I need you to tell me everything," I said as soon as he picked up. He sighed, like he'd been expecting the call. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. The restraining order, the divorce, why it ended. What she's capable of." Tom didn't hold back. He told me about their marriage, how Lauren had been charming at first, but the cracks started showing after a few months. She'd lied about small things at first, then bigger ones. She'd maxed out his credit cards, manipulated their friends into turning against him, and, when he'd finally confronted her, she'd gone full scorched earth. "She smashed my car, spread rumors about me, and even tried to get me fired from my job," he said, his voice heavy with bitterness. "When I finally filed for divorce, she made my life hell. Claimed I was abusive, tried to turn my own family against me. The restraining order was the only thing that kept her from showing up at my house in the middle of the night." My stomach churned. This wasn't just a messy divorce. Lauren was a full-blown manipulator, and I was her next target. "What do I do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "You do what I couldn't," Tom said. "Get ahead of her. Expose her lies before she can use them against you. And for God's sake, don't let her push you into a corner. That's where she's the most dangerous." I thanked him and hung up, feeling both relieved and more anxious than ever. I had a clearer picture now, but I also knew I was up against someone who wouldn't hesitate to destroy me if it meant she could come out on top. The next day, I started making calls. To mutual friends, neighbors, anyone who might have seen or heard something that could back up my side of the story. Slowly but surely, a pattern started to emerge. Lauren had been telling anyone who would listen that I'd abandoned her, that I was unstable, that she feared for her safety. But a few people, those who didn't buy into her act, shared stories that painted a very different picture. One neighbor mentioned seeing Kyle's van parked outside the house almost every night since I'd left. Another hinted that Lauren had been complaining about money issues for months, despite our finances being stable. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And as I pieced everything together, one thing became clear: Lauren and Kyle weren't just playing games, they were preparing for a war. But so was I. By the time I had gathered enough pieces to form a coherent picture, I was more certain than ever that Lauren wasn't just trying to ruin me, she was building a case to take me down completely. But what her ultimate goal was, I still couldn't figure out. Money? Revenge? Or just the thrill of watching me crumble? The first break in my investigation came from an unlikely source, our neighbor, Mrs. Grant. She was a kind older woman who had always been friendly, and I wasn't sure how much she'd know about Lauren's antics. But when I called her and casually asked if she'd noticed anything unusual, her response caught me off guard. "Oh, Josh, I wasn't going to say anything, but there's been a lot of commotion at your house lately," she said, her voice hesitant but concerned. "Strange men coming and going, deliveries at odd hours. And that van, that young man's van, is there all the time. Did you ever see or hear anything specific?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well," she hesitated, "I overheard her on the phone one day in the backyard. She was yelling about how she was going to make sure you paid for what you did. She kept saying she had a plan and that everything was going to work out in her favor." My pulse quickened. "Did she say anything else?" "Not much that made sense to me, dear," Mrs. Grant replied. "But if I were you, I'd be careful." She sounded angry. Desperate. Angry and desperate. A dangerous combination. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, legal consultations, and digging through every scrap of evidence I could find. I hired a private investigator, figuring a professional might be able to uncover things I couldn't. If Lauren wanted to fight dirty, I needed someone who could do the same, within legal limits, of course. That's when the PI, a sharp-eyed woman named Valerie, came back with something shocking. "Josh, I dug into Kyle's background like you asked," she said during our meeting. "And you're not going to like what I found." She slid a file across the table. Inside were photos, reports, and court records. Kyle had a criminal record, a history of fraud and theft. He'd been involved in multiple scams, usually targeting vulnerable people with promises of quick money. "This guy has a pattern," Valerie explained. "He gets close to someone with assets, manipulates them into trusting him, and then bleeds them dry. Sometimes he does it alone, sometimes with a partner." The word partner hit me like a punch to the gut. "You think he and Lauren are working together to, what? Steal from me?" I asked. "It's a strong possibility," Valerie said. "They might be using the divorce as cover to drain your accounts, or worse. Have you checked your financial records lately?" I hadn't, but I didn't waste any time. That evening, I logged into our joint accounts and started combing through the transactions. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then I noticed a series of withdrawals, each just below the threshold that would trigger a notification. $2,500 here. $3,000 there. Over the past month, thousands of dollars had disappeared from our savings account. My heart pounded as I scrolled further. Lauren had also opened a new credit card in both our names, racking up charges for high-end restaurants, spa treatments, and, most telling of all, a down payment for what appeared to be a luxury vacation. The rage boiled over, and I slammed my laptop shut. She wasn't just trying to win the divorce, she was robbing me blind in the process. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the lies, the betrayal, the sheer audacity of what she and Kyle were doing. The next day, I called my lawyer, Frank, and laid everything out for him. "We need to go on the offensive," I said. "I've got proof of the affair, the financial fraud, and even her shady dealings with Kyle. Can we use this to turn the tables?" Frank chuckled darkly. "Oh, we're not just going to turn the tables. We're going to flip them over and make her regret ever playing this game." With Frank's help, we filed an emergency motion to freeze our joint accounts and flagged the new credit card for fraud investigation. We also requested a forensic audit of all financial transactions over the past year, which would put a spotlight on every dollar Lauren and Kyle had siphoned off. I knew the fight was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had the upper hand. Lauren thought she could outmaneuver me, but she'd underestimated just how far I was willing to go to protect myself. And as for Kyle, he didn't realize it yet, but he was about to find out what happens when you back a cornered man into a wall. I felt a strange calmness settle over me after filing the motion. It was as if I had taken a small but significant step toward reclaiming control of my life. The days that followed were tense, every phone call a reminder of the war I was now in. Lauren and Kyle were still unaware of what I had uncovered, but that wouldn't last for long. I had a few days to breathe before the next strike came. It was a Wednesday evening when the first blow landed. I had just finished a meeting with Frank, where we discussed the next steps in my legal strategy, when I received an unexpected call. It was from the private investigator, Valerie. Her tone was sharp, urgent. "Josh, I need you to sit down. This just got a whole lot worse." I barely had time to sit before she hit me with the bombshell. "Kyle's not just after your money," she said, her voice low. "He's been talking to someone in your inner circle. Someone you trust." My stomach twisted. "Who?" "Your brother, Matt." I blinked, trying to make sense of what she was saying. "Matt? My brother's involved in this?" Valerie's voice tightened. "It looks like he's been feeding Kyle information about your finances, your legal strategy, and your personal plans. I don't have all the details yet, but I've got a couple of recordings that suggest he's been working with Kyle, sharing everything you've been doing behind the scenes." My mind raced as the realization hit. Matt. My own brother. He had been the one person I thought would always have my back. He knew everything about me, my strengths, my weaknesses, how much I valued family. And yet, he was helping Kyle tear me apart. I slammed my fist onto the table, frustration and disbelief overwhelming me. Why? Why would he do this? "I'm still piecing it together," Valerie said. "But from what I've heard, it seems like Matt's in deep with Kyle. He's promised to make a lot of money off this divorce, but he'll need you to lose for that to happen." "I'm sorry, Josh." The words hit me like a sucker punch. My brother wasn't just betraying me, he was actively working against me, trying to destroy everything I'd worked for. It was almost too much to wrap my head around. I didn't say anything for a long time. The weight of the betrayal settled on me like a physical force. What could I even do with this information? How could I confront him without tipping my hand? Finally, I found my voice. "What do we do now?" "We keep moving forward. We can't let him or Kyle know that we're onto them. I'll get you more evidence on Matt, but in the meantime, stay focused on your case. And don't confront him. Not yet. We don't want to give him a chance to cover his tracks." I knew she was right. I had to stay patient. But patience wasn't one of my strong suits. This betrayal hurt deeper than anything Lauren or Kyle had done. Family wasn't supposed to turn on you like this. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. My own brother, my flesh and blood, had turned on me. And in doing so, he had made this war 1,000 times more personal. The next morning, I drove to meet Frank. I needed to tell him about Matt, to see if he had any advice on how to handle it. Frank listened in silence as I explained everything, about Matt's involvement with Kyle, the recordings from Valerie, and the twisted web of lies that had entangled my family. When I finished, Frank's face was grim. "This changes things. It's not just a divorce anymore. This is a conspiracy, Josh." I felt a wave of disgust. My own brother. Frank met my eyes, his tone resolute. "We're not going to let them win. But we need to act fast. We'll bring Matt into the fold and expose him before he has a chance to do any real damage." And I want to get those recordings in front of a judge. Let's make sure this gets on the record. I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was on the offense. Over the next few days, Valerie worked tirelessly to gather more evidence on Matt's involvement. The recordings she had were damning, but we needed more. We needed to prove that he had been actively sabotaging me. Then, the breakthrough came. Valerie called with the news. "We got him," she said. "I've got a video of Matt meeting with Kyle at a cafe. They were discussing your finances, how to drain your accounts without you noticing. It's all on tape." My heart raced as I processed the news. "You have it? You can use it? I've already sent it to your lawyer. It's solid. This is exactly what you need to turn the tide." The video was everything I needed to expose Matt's betrayal, but it was also the final nail in the coffin for Lauren and Kyle. Now, I had the leverage I needed to bring them all down. As the legal battle intensified, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were only going to get darker before they got better. But one thing was clear, I wasn't going to let my family or my ex manipulate me anymore. I would fight for everything I deserved, and I would make sure that Lauren, Kyle, and Matt paid for everything they'd done. The legal proceedings were a whirlwind. After we gathered enough evidence, we made our move. I remember sitting in the cold, sterile courtroom, staring at Lauren, Kyle, and Matt, who were all trying to appear calm but seemed visibly rattled. Frank, my lawyer, stood in front of the judge, holding the newly obtained video evidence, a recording of Matt and Kyle discussing our financial situation over coffee. The judge seemed focused and attentive as Frank played the tape. I could tell that it was having a strong impact, even on Lauren, who suddenly looked pale and jittery. "Your Honor," Frank said, addressing the judge with confidence, "what you have just seen is proof of a conspiracy to defraud my client, Josh, of his money, property, and legal rights. We have here audio and video recordings of the defendants discussing the details of this fraudulent scheme, with detailed instructions on how they would manipulate Josh's finances and his legal strategy." The judge nodded, making notes as she listened to the recordings. She glanced at Matt, who was squirming in his seat, sweat beading on his forehead. Lauren, meanwhile, stared at me with daggers in her eyes, trying to project her usual icy, superior demeanor but failing. Kyle, on the other hand, looked completely unflustered, like he had been expecting this all along. Lauren, in particular, was beside herself. Her hands were trembling, and she kept glancing at Kyle, who seemed unfazed. I could almost see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how to spin this against me. She knew this was the final straw. "Your Honor, this is absurd," Lauren said, her voice shrill. "These recordings are clearly altered. There's no context. I never said those things, and I never intended to do anything illegal." Matt wasn't doing much better. His lawyer, a slick, suited man, was doing his best to twist the evidence and claim that it was all a fabrication. But even he seemed unsure of how to handle the situation, given the irrefutable proof staring him in the face. Frank calmly responded, "Your Honor, this is a direct conversation between the defendants, discussing a plan to exploit my client's assets and undermine his legal standing. The authenticity of the recordings has been verified, and the circumstances clearly show that these statements and actions constitute a criminal conspiracy." Lauren stood up abruptly, shouting, "This is outrageous. Josh is manipulating everything. He's lying, and this is just a sick attempt to humiliate me." The judge raised an eyebrow, her voice cold. "Mrs. Brooks, I suggest you keep your comments in check. This is a courtroom, and we take these proceedings very seriously." Lauren went quiet, but she continued glaring at me, her face twisted with rage. Kyle seemed almost bored, like he was waiting for the whole thing to blow over. Matt looked like he was slowly coming to grips with the reality of what was happening. After Frank made his closing argument, the judge adjourned the session. We were ordered to come back in a few days, but already I could see how things were shifting in my favor. The evidence had made a strong impact, and Lauren, Kyle, and Matt were clearly rattled. As I walked out of the courtroom with Frank, I felt a sense of triumph, though it was bittersweet. My family, the ones I trusted the most, had betrayed me. But now, at least, there was a path to justice. Lauren and Kyle would have to answer for what they had done, and so would Matt. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, emails, and more meetings with my lawyer. Frank and I prepared for the next phase of the case, which involved bringing Lauren, Kyle, and Matt in for questioning under oath. The judge wanted to get their version of events on record, though I couldn't imagine what lies they'd try to spin this time. The biggest challenge was Matt. My own brother, who'd betrayed me at every turn, who had sold me out for a few bucks, was now facing legal consequences. I couldn't look at him without feeling a surge of rage, but I knew I had to remain calm and focused. For my sake, for the sake of our family, no matter how shattered it was. As I waited for the next hearing, I couldn't help but feel like we were on the brink of something monumental. The truth was right there, staring us in the face, but it was still up to the judge and the jury to decide. And I didn't trust Lauren, Kyle, or Matt to play fair. Still, a strange sense of relief washed over me. I had finally found the courage to stand up for myself, to fight back against the people who'd done everything they could to destroy my life. I wasn't just playing defense anymore, I was fighting to win. In my heart, I knew I couldn't let this end without making sure Lauren, Kyle, and Matt faced the consequences for their actions. I just had to see it through. The next few days felt like a constant barrage of tension and uncertainty. Every morning, I woke up thinking about the next hearing, the next move, the next confrontation. I didn't know how much longer I could keep it together, but I also knew there was no turning back. Too much was at stake, and the damage had already been done. Then came the unexpected visit. It was a Thursday afternoon when I heard a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not anyone I wanted to see. When I opened it, there stood Matt. For a moment, I just stared at him. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and confusion. I had never expected him to come to me like this, not after everything that had happened. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. He hesitated, shifting from one foot to the other. His eyes were downcast, as if he couldn't meet my gaze. For a brief moment, I almost felt a flicker of sympathy for him. But that feeling vanished the second I remembered what he had done. I need to talk to you," Matt said quietly, his voice almost pleading. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Talk? About what? About how you sold me out to Kyle? Or how you've been helping him destroy me?" He winced, and I could see the guilt flash across his face. But then he straightened up, like he was trying to regain some semblance of control. "Look, Josh, I know what I did was wrong. But you have to understand, this whole situation, it got out of hand. I never meant for things to go this far." I almost laughed. "Never meant for things to go this far? Are you kidding me? You've been working with him for months. You've been feeding him everything I've done, everything I've planned. And now you want to pretend like it was all a mistake?" Matt swallowed hard, stepping closer. "I didn't know how to get out of it, Josh. I thought Kyle was going to help me, but then he started making promises, and I got caught up in it. I thought I could help you get out of the mess, but now it's too late. It's all gone too far, and I don't know how to fix it." I stood there, trying to keep my composure, but the anger was boiling up inside me. "You didn't get caught up in anything, Matt. You made a choice. You chose to turn on your own brother. And now you want me to believe that you're some kind of victim?" He shook his head. "I know I messed up. But before he could finish, I cut him off. You don't get to apologize now. You don't get to act like this is all some kind of misunderstanding. You knew exactly what you were doing when you worked with Kyle, when you betrayed me. And you knew how much it was going to hurt me. Matt's face twisted in frustration, and I could see tears welling up in his eyes. Josh, I'm sorry. I was stupid. But this isn't just about you. It's about me too. I've lost everything. I've ruined my life trying to help Kyle, and now I'm facing consequences I can't escape. I stepped back, shaking my head. You're not a victim here, Matt. You're a liar, and you're a traitor. You've ruined everything, not just for me, but for you, for Mom and Dad. You've dragged all of us down with your selfish choices. Matt's face fell, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the brother I once knew. The one I used to trust, the one I thought would always have my back. But that person was gone. He took a deep breath, then looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I know I can't make this right. But if there's any chance, if you can find it in yourself to forgive me, I'll do whatever it takes to help you. I'll do whatever I can to fix this. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him that there was no way I could ever forgive him, that nothing he said could erase the damage he had caused. But instead, I just stared at him, trying to keep my emotions in check. You can't fix this, Matt. You can't undo what you've done. And honestly, I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Matt's shoulders slumped as if the weight of his actions was finally sinking in. I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought Kyle was offering me a way out, but now it's too late. I'm just sorry, Josh. I didn't say anything. I just closed the door softly, leaving him standing there, his apology hanging in the air like a whisper. The conversation left me feeling more conflicted than I expected. On one hand, I knew Matt's apology was too little, too late. He had already made his choice, and nothing could change that. But on the other hand, the sheer vulnerability in his eyes, the way he tried to take responsibility, maybe, just maybe, it was a sign that he felt remorse. But no matter what, that didn't change the facts. He had crossed a line, and the damage was done. There was no going back from this. As I turned away from the door, I knew that the final battle was still ahead. But at least I now had the full truth. No more secrets. No more lies. And as much as it hurt, I had to face the reality, Matt was no longer a part of my life. Not in any meaningful way. The weeks dragged on, each one filled with a new layer of anxiety. The hearing was fast approaching, and the weight of everything that had happened, everything that was about to happen, settled deeper and deeper into my bones. After Matt's visit, I tried to push the whole situation from my mind as much as possible. There was no use in dwelling on what had already been done. But in the quiet moments, when I wasn't preparing for the next hearing or meeting with Frank, the reality of what my life had become hit me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Lauren, Kyle, and Matt, my own brother, had turned my life into a nightmare. I hadn't expected betrayal on this scale, not from the people I'd trusted the most. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that they weren't the only ones who had lost something. I had too. I lost trust. I lost the family I once believed in. I lost my sense of stability, my peace of mind. And for what? A few promises, a few lies, and a world of manipulation that had been carefully hidden from me until it was too late to stop. And yet, there was something about the whole thing that was almost surreal. Like I was watching my own life unravel from a distance, powerless to do anything but react. I didn't know how to feel anymore. But then came the storm. It started with a call from Frank, my lawyer. He told me that there had been a major shift in the case. Josh, I need you to come in. We've just received a letter from Kyle's lawyer, Frank said over the phone, his voice strained with urgency. What's it about? I asked, my heart beginning to race. They're trying to settle, Frank replied. They're offering a deal, one that could change everything. I was stunned. After everything, after all the evidence we had, after what had happened in the courtroom so far, they were trying to settle. Settle? I repeated, my voice flat. After everything they've done to me, after all the lies, now they want to settle. Exactly. But I need you to come in and discuss it. We can't make any decisions without you. I felt my stomach drop. My first instinct was to reject the idea entirely. I didn't want to settle. I didn't want to give them anything, especially not after they'd betrayed me so completely. But something about the way Frank said it made me realize that this could be a strategic move. Maybe they were trying to make me back down, to pressure me into accepting less than I deserved. Or maybe, just maybe, they were trying to avoid the consequences of everything they'd done. I'll be there in an hour, I said, hanging up without waiting for a response. When I walked into Frank's office, he looked up at me with a serious expression. Here it is, he said, sliding a thick folder across the table toward me. Kyle's lawyer is offering a settlement. They're willing to pay a significant sum in exchange for you agreeing to drop the charges and walk away. I opened the folder, scanning through the terms. They were offering a large sum of money, more than I could have imagined. But at what cost? What's the catch? I asked, already knowing the answer. Frank sighed. They want to keep this out of the public eye. No press, no scandal. They want you to walk away quietly. I stared at the offer, torn. Part of me wanted to take the money, to be done with it all, to walk away and never look back. But then the other part of me, the one that had been betrayed, the one that had fought so hard to get here, refused to let them off the hook so easily. This is a joke, right? I said, pushing the papers aside. They think I'll just forget everything. Forget how they've ruined my life, how they've turned my world upside down. I don't think they're expecting you to forget, Frank said quietly. But this is a business decision. They're trying to buy their way out of the mess they've created. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand through my hair. I knew Frank was right. This was about money and power, about avoiding public humiliation and legal consequences. But for me, it was more than that. This wasn't just about financial compensation, it was about justice, about making them pay for what they had done. I'm not taking the deal, I said, my voice firm. I'm not walking away. Not when they think they can just pay me off and make it all go away. Frank nodded, a slight smile tugging at his lips. I figured you'd say that. But I had to be sure. We'll keep pushing forward. But I need you to be prepared for what comes next. This could get messy. I stood up, feeling a sense of resolve that I hadn't felt in a long time. Let them make it messy. I'm not backing down now. As I left Frank's office, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Kyle, Lauren, and Matt had no idea what they were up against. They thought they could bribe their way out of this, but I was done letting them walk all over me. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not now, not ever. The storm was coming. And I was ready for it. The days after rejecting the settlement offer felt like the calm before an inevitable storm. The legal battle intensified, and I found myself consumed by it more than I expected. Every phone call, every email, every piece of evidence, it all seemed like a relentless barrage. But in some twisted way, it gave me purpose. It was the only thing that made sense anymore. As the hearing drew closer, the weight of the situation became unbearable. There were moments when I caught myself thinking about what my life could have been if none of this had happened. Would I still have been married to Lauren? Would I have been living a life that didn't feel like it was slowly crumbling around me? But I couldn't afford to dwell on the what-ifs. This was my reality now. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Lauren had played me for a fool. She'd fooled me into believing everything was fine, that our marriage was solid. She was a master of manipulation, and I had fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker. But no more. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this without facing the consequences of her actions. Then came the night that pushed me to my breaking point. It was late, just after midnight, when my phone buzzed. I had been trying to get some sleep, but my mind wouldn't let me rest. The constant thoughts of the case, of Lauren and her betrayal, kept me awake. The message was from an unknown number. At first, I thought it was just another spam message, but something about it felt different. "I need to talk to you. It's important." I stared at the screen for a moment, my heart beating faster. I didn't recognize the number, but the urgency in the message made me feel like I couldn't ignore it. I replied. "Who is this?" There was a long pause, and then a response came. "It's Matt." "I'm sorry, Josh. I need to tell you something. Something you don't know." I sat up, my mind racing. My brother? Why was he contacting me now? After everything that had happened, after he'd turned his back on me, why was he suddenly reaching out? I quickly typed back. "What is it? What do you need to tell me? I can't explain everything over text. But you need to meet me. I'll be at the old park near your place in 30 minutes. Please, Josh. It's important. I can't keep this from you anymore." I was torn. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to cut him off completely. But another part of me was curious. What could Matt possibly want to tell me now? I grabbed my coat and made my way out the door, my thoughts racing. The old park was quiet at this time of night, and I wasn't sure what to expect. The whole situation felt off, but I couldn't back out now. When I arrived, I saw Matt standing by the swings, looking like he was waiting for something, or someone. He looked different from the last time I saw him, like he'd been through something. His shoulders were slumped, and there was an air of guilt around him. I walked up to him, my voice cold. "What is it, Matt? What the hell do you want?" He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and fear. "Josh. I messed up. More than you know. I never should have gone along with it. I thought I could fix things, but now I'm in too deep." I narrowed my eyes. "What are you talking about? What did you get yourself into this time?" Matt hesitated, glancing around as if checking to make sure no one was listening. "You don't know the full story, Josh. You don't know everything about what Kyle and Lauren were planning. I didn't want you to get hurt, but I couldn't stop them. They had it all worked out. And I was part of it." My heart dropped. "What are you saying, Matt? Are you telling me that you were involved in their scheme from the start?" He nodded, looking down at his feet. "I didn't know what to do. I thought I could keep you safe by staying out of it, but I was wrong. I didn't know how deep it went until it was too late. They were going to do something worse than you think." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "What could be worse than what they've already done?" Matt took a deep breath and looked me straight in the eyes. "They weren't just trying to ruin you, Josh. They were planning to frame you for something they did. Something that would have destroyed your life for good. But I couldn't let that happen. That's why I'm here. I want to help you." I stood frozen, trying to process his words. Frame me? What was he talking about? Before I could say anything, Matt stepped closer and lowered his voice. "They were going to make it look like you were the one who did all of it. The affair, the lies, the manipulation. They were going to pin it on you and make it seem like you were the one who betrayed them. It would have been your word against theirs, and they would have destroyed you." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My own family, my own brother, had been part of this twisted plot all along. And now? I asked, barely able to speak. Matt's eyes were filled with regret, but there was a resolve in them now. "I can't undo what I did, Josh. But I can help you stop them. I've already started gathering evidence. The truth is out there, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure it comes to light." The weight of it all hit me like a ton of bricks. This was worse than I could have ever imagined. I wasn't just fighting a betrayal from my wife and my brother, this was a conspiracy, a plot designed to ruin my entire life. The storm wasn't just coming anymore. It had already arrived. And it was worse than I could have ever feared. The truth hit me like a freight train, leaving me reeling. My own brother, my flesh and blood, had been part of this entire scheme, this betrayal that was designed not only to destroy me emotionally but to destroy my entire life. I stood in the park, unable to process everything Matt had just told me. How had I not seen it? How had I not noticed the signs, the quiet looks between Kyle and Lauren, the subtle manipulation that now seemed so glaring in retrospect? But here I was, at the center of it all. The pieces were finally falling into place, and all I could do was try to keep up with the chaos unfolding before me. Matt seemed to sense the weight of the situation. He watched me, waiting for a response, but I was too stunned to speak. How long has this been going on, Matt? I finally managed to ask, my voice low, barely a whisper. How long have you been helping them? He shifted uncomfortably, the guilt written all over his face. It started small, Josh. Just a few things I thought I could ignore. But once they started planning the frame, I couldn't just walk away anymore. I knew it was wrong. But I didn't know how to stop them without everything blowing up. I shook my head, trying to process what he was saying. You're telling me that you've been helping them set me up for something worse. Something criminal. Not criminal, Matt corrected quickly. Not in a legal sense, anyway. But it would have ruined your reputation, your career, everything you've worked for. And I didn't want to see that happen to you. I couldn't breathe. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about the people closest to me, was a lie. Lauren, my wife, she wasn't just unfaithful. She was part of a plot to destroy me. And Kyle? My brother? He had willingly helped her. What do you want from me now, Matt? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why are you telling me this? Matt stepped forward, his eyes pleading. I want to make it right, Josh. I know I can't fix everything, but I'm telling you the truth now. I'm here to help you fight them. I can give you everything they've been planning. I can help you expose them for what they really are. I felt like I was drowning, struggling to keep my head above water. The betrayal, the lies, it was all too much. My brother, my wife, my entire life had been a lie, and now, it felt like I was watching it all burn to the ground. Why should I trust you, Matt? I asked, my eyes narrowing. You've already chosen a side. You've already been part of this. How can I know that you're not just trying to cover your own tracks now? Matt's face twisted with frustration, his voice rising. I'm not trying to cover anything up. I'm trying to help you. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to be part of that? No, Josh, I didn't. But I can't undo it. All I can do is make sure you don't lose everything because of them. I stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of deception. But all I saw was regret, genuine and raw. I didn't want to believe him, but at this point, it felt like I had no other choice. All right, I said finally, my voice firm. I'll hear you out. But you better have proof. If you're lying to me, if you're trying to play me again, I swear to God, I will never speak to you again. Matt nodded quickly, relief flooding his face. I have everything, Josh. I swear. I've been collecting evidence, little by little. Pictures, texts, everything. I can't give it all to you now, but I'll show you what I have. We'll make sure they can't get away with it. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The weight of everything was pressing down on me, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I might actually have a chance to fight back. I'll get a hold of Frank, I said, pulling out my phone. We're going to make sure they pay for this. I don't care what it takes. Matt nodded in agreement, but there was a nervous tension in his eyes. Just be careful, Josh. Lauren and Kyle, they won't back down. They'll do anything to protect themselves. Don't trust them. Not for a second. I didn't need to hear it. I already knew. The storm had already hit, and now it was time to make sure that the people who had tried to ruin me would finally face the consequences of their actions. But as I walked away from Matt that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. There were still too many loose ends, too many unanswered questions. But I would uncover them all, piece by piece, until the truth was laid bare. And then, once everything was exposed, would make sure Lauren, Kyle, and Matt, especially Matt, knew that betrayal had consequences. It wasn't over yet.